2024, police in Westlake, Ohio, were called to a local
When dating goes wrong.
school by a male employee who reported that his obsessed ex-girlfriend was sitting in the parking lot yet again. Responding officers came face to face with
What the hell?
27-year-old Hannah Freeman, who initially claimed
She's
that
kind of cute. Why she stalk
her
her?
ex-boyfriend had invited her there. In police body cam footage, the man could be heard telling the
She's a
cops that
school
Freeman
teacher?
had followed him to his apartment the previous day and stolen various items from his car, including his medication, laptop, wallet, and keys. He also accused Freeman of making $1,000 worth of Amazon purchases with his credit card. Freeman, who worked as a school teacher in another district,
Wow.
following her ex or stealing from his car, but there was evidence to suggest that she had been denied following her ex or stealing from his car.
She returned and took a bunch of things out of my car.
But there was evidence to suggest that she had been stalking the victim for a prolonged time period,
Damn.
including footage which showed her arriving at the man's workplace 33 times in 19 days.
33 times?
She was arrested on charges of menacing by stalking and aggravated theft and is currently free on bond. In the meantime, Freeman's employer has placed her on administrative leave pending the outcome of the case. Since Freeman's arrest, there have been calls to have her permanently removed from the classroom due to the concerning nature of her current and past interactions with law enforcement. People have also been quick to point out that her father, Michael Freeman, is the local police chief, leading
What?
to speculation that the law has gone easy on her in the past and will do so in the future. But there's no proof to suggest
She's
that
lucky.
these
She's lucky.
predictions are true, and the only way to know what will happen is to wait and see. Number 14. Edward Holly. In March 2003, 20-year-old college student Megan McDonald was found bludgeoned to death on a dirt path in Wallkill, New York. Suspicion immediately fell upon her recent ex-boyfriend and marijuana supplier, Edward Holly, but there wasn't enough evidence to make an arrest. Now 42 years old and wheelchair-bound due to an accident, Holly was interviewed 4 times over a 20-year period. In an unexpected turn of events, he was charged with McDonald's murder in 2023. According to a criminal complaint, McDonald received monthly pension benefits after the death of her father, a high-ranking former NYPD detective. She used some of the money to help Holly buy a car, but he refused to pay her back, prompting her to end the relationship. McDonald was last seen in her car outside an apartment complex, where witnesses saw Holly getting into the vehicle. She failed to show up at her waitressing job the next day, and her body and abandoned car were discovered over the following days. She had been brutally beaten to death with a blunt object. Shortly before her murder, McDonald had started a new romantic relationship, leading investigators to suspect that Holly killed her out of jealousy. Detectives conducted hundreds of interviews and never gave up on the case, but 2 decades passed before they finally had enough evidence to move forward with criminal charges. Holly was already incarcerated on a probation violation stemming from an unrelated drug case.
R.I.P. to
Was
Holly.
arrested for
Holly.
McDonald's murder.
R.I.P. to that girl.
Prosecutors have not revealed details about the evidence that finally led to the charge against the defendant, and the case has hit a few details about the evidence that finally led to the charge against the defendant, and the case has hit a few snags. A year after Holly's arrest, McDonald's family accused the prosecutor, Orange County District Attorney David Hoovler, of offering the defendant a secret plea deal. At the same time, an internal New York State Police report accused Hoovler of deliberately tampering with the investigation. Hoovler denied the allegations but recused himself from the case, citing a conflict of interest stemming from his previous work as a defense attorney who represented someone with possible connections to the murder. Amid repeated delays, the case is currently scheduled to go to trial in January 2025. Number 13. Andy Chu. In August 2024, police responded to a Seattle townhouse after a neighbor complained about flooding. Inside the home, officers found the murdered body of 26-year-old Zoe Soo-yeon Heo, who had arrived in Washington from Hawaii less than 24 hours earlier to celebrate her birthday with her boyfriend, 25-year-old Andy Chu. Her face, head, neck, chest, arms, and legs were covered in blunt force injuries, and there was a ball lodged in her throat. Chilling surveillance video showed the woman and Chu entering the townhouse together with bags of groceries shortly before the murder. Nothing seemed amiss.
Let's see what happens.
Indicating that Heo had no awareness of the gruesome fate. that awaited her. The next day,
Oh,
she
he's
was
just walking away.
leaving the residence alone. A short while later, a concerned friend noticed that he was acting extremely out of character and dropped him off at an emergency room where he attacked a nurse. The police
What?
were called, by which point they had discovered Her's body and were interested in speaking with Chu anyway. During questioning, Chu admitted to choking and drowning Her in
Wow.
the bathtub while high on the drug Molly. He said he removed his girlfriend's body from the tub and tried to revive her before his friends took him to the hospital, and that he placed the ball in her mouth to try fixing her broken jaw. According to the most recent updates on the case, he's currently undergoing a mental evaluation to determine whether he's competent to proceed with his case.
Right through that girl.
Number 12. Kevin Shop. In April of 2018,
Kevin Shop?
39-year-old Maureen Spratt accused her ex-boyfriend, 37-year-old Kevin Shop, of viciously beating her at her home in the Scottish town of Erskine. Shop was
Damn,
arrested but maintained
Erskine?
his innocence and accused
That's far.
Spratt of being the abuser. The charges were dropped and he walked away a free man while the blame fell squarely upon Spratt. A year later, however, Shop
Wow.
violated his bail conditions by
course
verbally
he did.
attacking and threatening Spratt at a park. He was charged accordingly and once again denied any wrong.
Trophy. Scots woman tells of joy after ex who was accused of stripping.
Claiming in court that
What?
Spratt had stalked him obsessively and faked pregnancies in an attempt to draw him back into her life. At one point, Shop even pressed criminal charges against Spratt, who pleaded guilty to stalking because the court proceedings were requiring her to take more time off from her job than she could afford. During
Wow.
Shop's bail violation hearing in late 2019,
They failed her.
Spratt explained that Shop knew all her account passwords and could have easily fabricated the conversations he turned over to the court as evidence of her supposed obsession with him. She described
Wow.
her ex as an extremely controlling cheater who constantly checked her phone and wouldn't let her go anywhere alone despite his own unwillingness to be faithful, During her testimony,
Who looks
Spratt
just like
claimed that
his
Shop
his
continued
father,
abusing her
that girl.
even after they broke up. His behavior escalated to stalking, despite him being banned from going near Spratt as a condition of his bail. All the while, Shop went out of his way to make Spratt look like the crazy party who refused to move on from their relationship. Shop was ultimately found guilty of violating bail, and the judge banned him from contacting Spratt for a year. While it may not seem like a major victory, the outcome came as a relief to Spratt, who told reporters that she felt justice had been served. Number 11. Jacob Klein.
There's nobody died, I think.
In April 2022, 40-year-old physician's assistant Jacob L. Klein drove from Franklin County, Virginia to New Scotland, New York, where he spent 3 days stalking his ex-girlfriend and her husband. He hadn't spoken
What?
to 29-year-old Ilana Radin in 4 years, and Radin had
In
no
4 years?
idea that Klein was spying on her. After lurking around the property for a few days, Klein waited for Radin to leave for work one morning, then entered the residence and ambushed her husband, 35-year-old Philip Rabadi.
What a pussy.
By the time Rabadi's concerned loved ones found him bound and stabbed to death, Klein was on his way back to Virginia. Investigators soon uncovered ample evidence detailing Klein's movements in the days leading up to Rabadi's
Bro couldn't get over it.
making it clear that he was responsible for the crime. After arriving in the Albany area, Klein had rented a car and scoped out Radin and Rabadi's home, as well as the hospital that the couple worked at. Surveillance footage showed him making several stops at the couple's home, indicating the amount of thought and planning that he put into his crime. As Klein re-entered Virginia, law enforcement was waiting to greet him at the state line. He was taken into custody on a federal unlawful flight from prosecution charge and was extradited to New York to face a murder trial. Klein and Rabadi had never met, leaving Klein's motive unclear. He never explained his reasons for killing the victim while representing himself at trial, but instead argued for his innocence based on a lack of his DNA at the crime scene. The jury found him guilty as charged, and the judge
That dude's
imposed
crazy.
the maximum sentence of 25 years to life.
Yeah, that dude's crazy.
Number 10.
He's crazy in that.
Nijinsky Dix. On a November evening in 2020, police responded to the sound of gunshots at the Washington, D.C. apartment of 44-year-old Terry Hickman, who was found lying on the floor with multiple bullet wounds. Kneeling beside him was 37-year-old Nijinsky Dix, a University of Illinois PhD student, whom he had casually dated for 3 months. Dix had a gun in her hand and her mother on speakerphone, ready to tell the cops that her daughter had accused Hickman of shoving her and felt threatened. While speaking with detectives down at the police station, Dix conveniently claimed to be suffering from memory loss. In an attempt to help her recall the events of earlier that day, police showed her a photo of Hickman which she practically repelled from while repeatedly shouting, "Get it away from me!" Hickman's family told investigators that Dix had been stalking the victim ever since they broke up 6 months earlier. Unable to accept that Hickman didn't want a serious relationship at a time when he was fresh out of a divorce and focusing on other priorities, Dix tried winning him over with money, trips, and jewelry.
What? Of her? Wait, what?
Which he turned down. 3 months before the murder, Hickman blocked Dix on his phone and tried to cut contact with her completely. Dix's obsession only worsened as she became
so she was obsessed.
Jealous of women whom she believed Hickman was interested in. She flew to Washington, D.C.
She flew to Washington?
In September of 2020 and showed up at his apartment unannounced, then traveled there again 2 months later and killed him. Authorities charged Dix with second-degree murder and 2 weapon-related counts. In 2023, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder while armed. She was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of post-release supervision.
That's it.
Prison, followed pleaded guilty to second-degree murder while armed. She was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison.
18 years is not enough.
5 years of post-release supervision. Number 1. Justin Cole Carroll. 22-year-old Donasia Alexis Holloway was driving to her home in Waterboro, South Carolina, after a beach vacation in May of 2021 when she noticed her ex-boyfriend, 24-year-old Justin Cole Carroll, following her in his pickup truck. Carroll had recently been released on bail after being arrested for domestic violence against Holloway.
She should have called the cops.
She had no interest whatsoever in rekindling the relationship, but Carroll refused to take no for an answer despite being banned from contacting or going near Holloway via a court-issued order of protection. As Holloway pulled into her apartment complex parking lot, she pulled out her phone and began recording video of Carroll lurking on the property. She parked next to a police car and kept her doors locked as she continued to film. A few minutes later, Carroll shot Holloway 4 times through her car window.
She should have fucking did.
At the scene, he sped off in his pickup truck and was pulled over by police several hours later after initially claiming he had traveled to Charlottesville. That day, Carroll stopped talking and requested a lawyer. Without enough evidence to detain him, police initially had no choice but to let him go. But it wasn't long before he landed back in custody. Carroll's hands tested positive for gunshot residue, and the search of his phone revealed that he had recently wiped the device clean. Additionally, the video Holloway captured on her phone helped to strengthen the case against the suspected killer, who had a documented history of violence dating back to his teen years. Carroll also had a known record for physically abusing Holloway, starting just months into their relationship, which was what had prompted her to break up with him in the first place. In April 2024, Carroll was found guilty of Holloway's murder and sentenced to 60 years in prison. Holloway's family believes she would still be alive today if her killer had remained in jail during the domestic violence case, and have called on the justice system to do better when it comes to protecting people in situations like hers. Number 8. Tawny Blazejowski. After dating for 3 years, Joe Good of St. Augustine, Florida, broke up with his girlfriend, Tawny Blazejowski. The relationship had started out well, but by then, Good had become tired of walking on eggshells in order to avoid upsetting Blazejowski, who was reportedly prone to mood swings and angry outbursts. Furious over the relationship ended, Blazejowski launched a relentless campaign to destroy Good's life. She hijacked his online accounts and sent explicit photos of him to his employer, causing him to lose his job of 24 years.
Oh shit.
Lied to the police, even going as far as going to the police with injuries and falsely blaming Good. Blazejowski also accused Good of crimes against children, landing him at the center of a humiliating investigation. Good was arrested 3 times as a result of Blazejowski's lies, and his loved ones and associates suffered as well. Blazejowski targeted everyone in his life, including neighbors, co-workers, and even his girlfriend's landlord, who received letters in the mail threatening to burn his house down if he failed to evict Good's girlfriend. The tide finally began to turn in Good's favor after investigators began to question Blazejowski's truthfulness, resulting in a search of her home and computer. They discovered an abundance of incriminating evidence, leading to a multitude of charges against Blazejowski for the severe torment she had inflicted upon her victims. In 2014, she pleaded guilty to 8 felonies, including 4 counts of aggravated stalking, 3 counts of making threats or extortion,
she got
1 count of making a false.
She got one side right here. These are 2 sides. One side that kind of cares and one side that don't give a fudge.
Report of child abuse, abandonment, or neglect. The judge sentenced
And since she's been in prison, now she don't give a fudge.
Blazejowski to 9 years
Or
in
jail.
prison, but she
9
was convicted
years?
of
That's
3
it?
additional extortion charges in 2018 for mailing harassing letters from prison, landing her additional time behind bars. Assuming she doesn't for mailing harassing letters from prison, landing her
Dang, she was mailing harassing letters?
additional time behind
She's
bars.
still that
Assuming
crazy?
she doesn't catch any more charges while in prison, she'll be released in August of 2027.
Oh yeah, you better run. She gets
Benjamin
released.
Nowell,
Better run.
29-year-old mother of 3, Brittany Phillips, was driving a friend home from a party in Webb, Alabama, in July of 2022 when she noticed that her ex-boyfriend, 35-year-old Benjamin Adam Nowell, was following her. Nowell struck Phillips's car with his vehicle, prompting her to
Damn.
exit the car with the intention of calling 911. Just moments later, Nowell fatally shot his ex-girlfriend in the head. He fled the scene. It was long
Dang.
gone by the time police arrived, prompting an intensive large-scale manhunt throughout the area. Houston County Sheriff Donald Valenza later described the search effort as one of the largest he had ever participated in. After nearly 12 hours of searching, members of law enforcement exited the woods with a dirty, wet, shirtless, and defeated-looking Nowell in tow. He was detained without bail at the Houston County Jail
I
in
wonder where they found him.
Dothan on capital murder and criminal trespass charges. Just a day prior to the shooting, Nowell had exited a work release program after serving time for theft and drug charges. Phillips's friend, Shane Crum, told local station WDHN that Nowell stalked the young woman constantly and refused to leave her alone, leading many to believe that he
Weirdo.
murdered Phillips in a jealous fit of rage over her decision to end their 14-month relationship. Nowell pleaded not guilty to the charges and remains held without bail as the case inches its way through the court system. Number
Then he gets smoked.
6. Rosendo Montoya. After a brief fling with his 43-year-old McDonald's co-worker, Laura
Bruh.
West, 27-year-old Rosendo Montoya became obsessed with the older woman, who was no longer interested in seeing him. Instead of working through his negative emotions and moving on, he fed his overwhelming urge to ensure that if he couldn't have West, no one would. Shortly
What?
before 5 a.m. on July 29th, 2023, firefighters responded to a reported fire at West's trailer home in Lemon, where she was found dead from a bullet wound to the head. Her roommate, 33-year-old Mary Hines, was nowhere to be found despite her car and all her belongings being
What?
present at the residence. Several days later, members of law enforcement witnessed Montoya throwing garbage bags filled with partial human remains into a dumpster outside his workplace. Police arrested him during a traffic stop, and he soon confessed to killing West and Hines. He led investigators to Hines' body, which had been dumped in tall grass along a roadside. Both she and West had been shot with a 9mm pistol. Montoya told police that he waited inside West's trailer and shot her as she arrived home. He then waited for Hines and murdered her in the same fashion. District Attorney Audrey Lewis described the double homicide as a single dating woman's worst nightmare, noting that West paid for her decision to end a short-lived relationship with her life. In 2024, Montoya pleaded guilty to 2 counts of capital murder in exchange for being spared from the death penalty. The convicted double killer
Oh, you
showed
got
no
lucky.
remorse or emotion as the judge sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole. Number 5.
Of course you did.
Kiara Mack. 23-year-old Kiara Mack had a promising career as a junior accountant with Ernst & Young in Melbourne, Australia. But she nearly jeopardized her professional future by becoming preoccupied with childish drama and getting in trouble with the law after her boyfriend broke up with her in early 2020. During a reckless 3-month-long rampage, Mack spray painted the word cheater
No way.
on her ex's car in pink twice and bombarded him with alarming and threatening messages, vowing to ruin the victim's life. She said things like, "Your life is over. I know the code to your house.
Bruh.
Checkmate and initiate."
Checkmate.
Like, "Your life is over. I know the code to your house."
She's
Checkmate
crazy.
And initiating phase 2. In her efforts to make good on her threats, she posted photos of her ex in his underwear on Instagram, implied that she planned to vandalize his sister's car, physically attacked him outside his residence, and reminded him that she knew where he worked and hung out. At one point, the victim moved in an attempt to regain some semblance of privacy and safety, prompting Mack to obsessively drive around in search of his car. Desperate to get his life back, Mack's ex reported her to the police and she was charged accordingly for her crimes. She tried to downplay the severity of her actions when questioned by law enforcement, claiming that her threatening words toward the victim were just us arguing, and denying responsibility for scratches on his arms that he blamed her for. In 2021, Mack pleaded guilty to 6 charges, including stalking, criminal damage, and assault. She blamed her behavior on mental health issues, which she claimed
No way.
were exacerbated
What the fuck? It's too bad to leave your sister's car out there initiating phase 2. I know where you live. I know where you work. I know your foodie club. I know your favorite bars. I know your go-to. Whoa.
The isolation that came along with the COVID-19 pandemic, and insisted she was completely embarrassed and ashamed of her conduct. As she pleaded with the judge to spare her from any criminal convictions, the judge told Mac to stop acting like a 7-year-old, but ultimately granted the request, giving her an opportunity to avoid a criminal record as long as she adhered to the conditions of a 15-month community order.
Of course, because she's pretty.
He was also fined $1,000 and ordered to undergo mental health treatment. The decision to extend leniency to the young woman was made in consideration of the wishes of her ex-boyfriend, who thought she would benefit more from mental help than punishment.
What?
4.
He was for sure still hitting that.
MacPhail. British teenager Holly Newton's family wasn't surprised when her ex-boyfriend Logan MacPhail murdered her in an alleyway in January of 2023. Fueled by obsessive fury, MacPhail stabbed Newton 36 times, plunging a knife into her with so much force that it snapped. Throughout Newton's 18-month on and off relationship with MacPhail, her friends and family had noticed that he was controlling and toxic. He tried to isolate Newton from her support system, demanded to know her whereabouts at all times, and got upset if she went anywhere without him. And while the couple broke up often,
what a weirdo.
MacPhail always guilted Newton into taking him back by acting hopeless and making her worry about his mental well-being more than her own. When Newton finally put her foot down and ended the relationship for good, MacPhail was unwilling to respect her decision to go separate ways. On the day before Newton's murder, he went to her family's house in Hexham, Northumberland, and tried persuading one of her siblings to let him inside. They refused, and Newton's mother, Michaela, called the police, who drove MacPhail home. Alarmed by MacPhail's escalating behavior, Michaela decided it was time to seek help from law enforcement. She scheduled a meeting with the police for the following day, but when Haley begged to go out with friends instead, she relented and rescheduled a meeting for later in the day. It proved to be the most regretful decision of Michaela's life. Armed with a kitchen knife, MacPhail followed Newton for nearly an hour, leading up to the stabbing, proving that he acted in a premeditated and deliberate fashion. But when the case went to court, his defense attorney argued that he suffered from cognitive disabilities, which rendered him incapable of understanding the wrongfulness of his actions. The jury disagreed and found MacPhail guilty of murder, resulting in a life sentence with a minimum of 17 years.
That's
Number
it,
3.
17 years.
Tommy Lee Powell.
She got smoked.
In
She got
December
life.
2022, police in Independence, Kentucky, were called to do a welfare check at the home of 32-year-old Amber Lee Harris, whose co-workers had grown concerned after she stopped showing up at her job a few days earlier.
I think I've
Officers were
seen
greeted
this.
by the woman's boyfriend, 55-year-old Tommy Lee Powell, who quickly revealed that Harris was dead and admitted to killing her. Powell was immediately handcuffed while police entered the home, where they found Harris's body. She had been dead for 3 days after being shot in the head at close range with a shotgun, resulting in a scene described by Assistant Commonwealth's Attorney Taylor Roof as so gruesome it looked like something out of a horror movie. Neighbors told police that they recently overheard loud banging from the couple's apartment. Curiously, however, they had not heard any arguing through the building's paper-thin walls. After being treated at the hospital for dehydration, Powell was booked into custody on suspicion of murder. He confessed to killing Harris for a $20,000 insurance policy he had taken out in their name the previous month.
Not to be
which
rude.
listed himself as
Not to be rude, but you did that over 20 grand? Come on.
beneficiary. Powell had previously been convicted of a domestic violence assault charge in April of 2022, just months before the killing. According to a complaint, he had choked Harris until she blacked out during an argument over her social media use. The judge agreed to drop the case as long as Powell underwent anger management and domestic violence classes, which he failed to do. Despite his failure to meet these obligations, it does not appear as though the case was ever revisited in court. In August 2023, Powell pleaded guilty to murder. He apologized to Harris's family and implored the judge for leniency, hoping his military service would count as a mitigating factor toward his punishment. But the judge refused to go easy on him and instead sentenced him
What
to
is he eating, paper?
life without parole, thereby setting the example that domestic violence will not be tolerated in Kenton County. Today's topic was requested by Tom Billard. Comments.
I'm sorry, no.
31-year-old Victor Saucedo and 27-year-old Vegas Bray met in 2011 while serving in the U.S. Navy in Southern California. They dated for several months before Saucedo ended their relationship due to Bray's jealousy toward the mother of his child. Over the following year, Bray found alarming ways to let Saucedo know just how upset she was with him for dumping her. She deflated his car tires, smeared peanut butter on the front door of his home, and managed to locate him at his new residence after he moved specifically to avoid her. A friend of
Crazy.
Saucedo's would later recall things like eggs, jelly, paint, and vinegar being thrown at his house, but the police never identified a suspect in any of these incidents. Saucedo told another friend that he didn't think law enforcement was taking his complaints seriously because he was a man complaining about a woman and had not endured any physical harm. In October 2012, Bray and Saucedo briefly discussed the possibility of rekindling their romance, but Saucedo wasn't interested in a serious relationship and Bray was, and she soon boiled over with rage. After spending the night at Saucedo's apartment, she left and returned later that day with a gun. Bray shot Saucedo 9 times, then called 911 and tried claiming that no foul play was involved. Unconvinced by her version of events, police arrested Bray on suspicion of first-degree murder. She was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. If you enjoyed this episode, then you'll definitely enjoy number 1.
Number 1.
Number 1. Jared Devery Hill.
Jeffrey,
Single
never heard
mother
of
of
it.
2, Renee Sue O'Neill's life was destroyed by her ex-boyfriend, 31-year-old chiropractor
RP.
Jared Devery Hill, who terrorized her mercilessly and for months on end. He threw a rock through the window of her Lincoln, California home,
Damn.
narrowly missing her face, stole her gun, repeatedly broke into her house and tracked her down at her new apartment after she moved in a desperate attempt to attain safety.
Bruh.
Hill also showed little to no regard for an order of protection banning him from contacting or going near O'Neill, but his actions eventually caught up with him, and in 2017, Hill pleaded no contest to felony stalking and domestic violence charges. O'Neill planned to read a victim impact statement in court but never got the opportunity because she was fatally shot in her garage the day before the scheduled sentencing hearing. Hours later, Hill was also found dead. The court hearing commenced as scheduled despite the defendant and victim no longer being alive. While moving to dismiss the case, the prosecutor made the unusual move of asking the judge for permission to read O'Neill's victim impact statement. The judge allowed it, ensuring that O'Neill was given the voice she deserved, even after losing her life to her
W.
unrelenting stalker.
What is
Number
that to read,
6.
though? Number 6.
Matthew Borges. Massachusetts high schooler Lee
Alright, that's it.
Bye, have a great time.